Hi everyone, welcome back. In our previous videos, we've been looking at Aristotle's first principles. We've been looking at what the principles are, and Aristotle's been claiming that we have them. We now have another question we have to answer, which is how do we acquire those first principles, well, in the first place? And what I'm going to do in this video is discuss, well, the problems that Aristotle raises with this, and as we're going to see, there are some connections back to Plato, and then we're going to look at his own solution. Now, one thing I have to mention here is that the text we're going to look at is a little bit difficult. It's a little bit complex, but don't worry. We've got a safety net built in for this exercise. I'm going to be your guide, so let's get started. Let's have some fun. Now, the text we're looking at is Posterior Analytics, Book 2, Chapter 19, and Aristotle's going to begin by restating the problem. He says, "We've already said that scientific knowledge through demonstration is impossible unless a man knows the primary immediate premises. But there are questions which might be raised in respect of the apprehension of these immediate premises. One might not only ask whether it is of the same kind as the apprehension of the conclusions, but also whether there is or is not scientific knowledge of both, or scientific knowledge of the latter, and of the former a different kind of knowledge. And further, whether the developed states of knowledge are not innate, but come to be in us, or are innate, but at first unnoticed." Now it's this last part that Aristotle's going to focus on more, the question whether these first principles are innate in us, that is to say, whether we are born with them, as Plato suggested, or whether we acquire them in some other way. Now this is what Aristotle says. "Now it is strange if we possess them, the first principles, from birth, because it means that we possess apprehensions more accurate than demonstration and fail to notice them." So that would be weird, right, if we already had the first principles at birth, but we never noticed that they were there. If, on the other hand, we acquire them and do not previously possess them, how could we apprehend and learn without a basis of pre-existent knowledge? So Aristotle here seems to be suggesting in order for me to know certain things or come to learn certain things, there's certain other things that I have to know first. Well, if I don't have them, how am I going to acquire the later knowledge? He says, because that is impossible, as we used to find in the case of demonstration. So, it emerges that neither can we possess them from birth, nor can they come to be in us if we are without knowledge of them to the extent of having no such developed state at all. And here Aristotle draws his conclusion. Therefore, we must possess a capacity of some sort, we could also translate that as ability of some sort, but not such as to rank higher in accuracy than these developed states. So the answer that Aristotle's going to give here is going to focus on how we acquire this knowledge, let's call it, through a certain kind of ability that we have. And he's going to explain that ability next. Let's look at Aristotle's answer. Aristotle says, "Let us now restate the account given already, though with insufficient clearness. When one of a number of logically indiscriminable particulars has made a stand, the earliest universal is present in the soul. For though the act of sense perception is of the particular, its content is universal. So is man, for example, not the particular man, Callias. A fresh stand is made among these rudimentary universals, and the process does not cease until the indivisible concepts, the true universals, are established. For example, such and such a species of animal is a step toward the genus animal, which by the same process is a step toward a further generalization." What does this mean? In class, when I talk about this, I sometimes like to use like an IKEA catalog or furniture or something. For our purposes here, let's use a particular object that we might become acquainted with. So let's say, for example, I'm looking at an orange, okay? Now, what Aristotle says is that when I perceive an orange, I'm seeing this particular orange. Let's call it Harvey, right? I'm seeing this particular one. And what happens is when I perceive it, that image is lodged in my soul, and it stays there. Aristotle says I'm capable of memory, so I'm capable of remembering what I saw. Now, on another day, I might see a second orange. Okay, this was Harvey. Maybe this one is Joanne. Okay, and then on a third day, I might see a third orange, Bill. So Harvey, Joanne, Bill. Now what happens is that all three of these images get lodged in my soul, and then of course I see many other oranges because I live in Southern California. And what happens? Well, eventually the mind has stored so many of these images that there is a capacity in my soul which is able to notice what is common among them. So for example, I then form the universal, and that allows me to think not just of the individual or particular orange that I see, but of oranges in general. That's now a universal. So, and then of course from there I can make further generalizations, such as this is a fruit, or it's part of a particular species of tree, or other kinds of understandings of how nature works in general. Aristotle says then, we conclude that these states of knowledge are neither innate in a determinate form, nor developed from other states of knowledge, but rather from sense perception. It is like a rout in battle, stopped by first one man making a stand and then another, until the original formation has been restored. The soul is so constituted as to be capable of this process. And like the image that I'm showing right now, it's a bit like, again, if we go back to our oranges, all of our oranges, right, the images in our mind collect together until this thing in our mind, which he calls nous, this capacity, is capable of, in some sense, putting all these images together, all these things, until we form the concepts that we know around us. So here, like our image on the screen, right, all these soldiers, right, one makes a stand, then another, and then they come into some kind of formation. Now in this last section of the video, I want to make some concluding remarks. So first, I think that Aristotle's theory that he puts forward about how we acquire concepts is in many ways ingenious and in many ways ahead of its time. For example, contemporary philosophers seem to think, and again, everything in philosophy is controversial, but many seem to agree that there are some parts of our thinking that occur at an automatic, subconscious level, which in turn provide concepts for our conscious mind to think about. And I think that that theory has, well, a lot going for it. And that's pretty much Aristotle's theory. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention here at the end has to do with ways in which I think Aristotle compares to Plato. Now, whichever way you come out on this, that's up to you, but I at least wanted to draw some points because I think it shows both Aristotle's orientation towards his teacher, and also I think shows the different ways that we're going to move now. So when we move into some other parts of Aristotle, you're going to see, I think, part of the motivation for this clear difference. So to begin with, for Plato, he says that we get knowledge of we get any kind of knowledge that's worth thinking about through recollection, and we get this in our past lives. For Aristotle, on the other hand, we grasp concepts by perceiving the world here and now. For Plato, we are born with the knowledge that we need. This knowledge was acquired, it's been in our soul the whole time, and it's just there waiting to be discovered. For Aristotle, we're born without knowledge, but we do have capacities. And again, remember, Aristotle said that it would be strange if I already had this knowledge in there someplace, but I didn't notice it. Finally, Plato will often say in his works that we need a helper. In some dialogues, for example, he has Socrates refer to himself as a midwife of ideas, which is a really interesting image, right? Someone who helps us, in some sense, give birth to these ideas that are already in us. Now for Aristotle, this is interesting because in a way, on one reading, this process works automatically in the background. So I'll leave you then with, I think, two questions to think about. One, does Aristotle have a helper of some kind, something that can assist us in doing this work? And in fact, I'm going to show you in the next discussion that I think there is something that can function as a helper. And another question to consider in comparison to Plato is recalling again the paradox that we saw in the Meno about how we can search for anything. What would Aristotle's answer to that paradox be? Given what he's said about how we acquire knowledge, how would he frame an answer to that puzzle? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and we'll continue our discussions.